The OnePlus 8 Pro is a dream come true for many fans of the company for three main reasons. First of all, it is the first phone to get an IP68 rating for dust and water resistance. Secondly, it also supports wireless charging, again a first in a OnePlus device. And thirdly, it does cost a lot less than it does in international markets, and it's still a lot cheaper than flagships from Samsung and Apple. However, the big question is, should you be paying up to 60,000 rupees on the OnePlus 8 Pro? Well, stick around to find out in our review. Now, before we go ahead, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and also hit that bell icon so you're the first to know whenever we push out a new video. Even though the OnePlus 8 Pro is heavier and bulkier than the 8, I've absolutely enjoyed using it. It's not the most comfortable phone to use one-handed, but the build quality and display more than make up for it. The first thing I wanted to try out was their IP68 rating, and while I didn't go too crazy, it easily survived splashes and a few dunks in water. Next, I wanted to check out that sweet 120Hz refresh rate on the display. Now, the OnePlus 8 Pro can run at 120Hz and the Quad HD Plus resolution simultaneously, which is something you still can't do on Samsung's S20 series. Content looks good even at the lower resolution, but I personally preferred the native Quad HD Plus resolution for that added sharpness. I'm generally not a big fan of the pre-applied screen protectors on smartphones, and the one used on the 8 Pro is especially annoying. This is because the 8 Pro's display actually curves on the sides, but the screen protector doesn't go all the way to the edges. As a result, the display does offer a more immersive feel, but this also means your fingers are almost always touching the screen. Palm projection works well, and I was able to use the phone even when the sides of my hand were clearly in contact with the display. Trying to take photos with one hand can get a little tricky, as I did inevitably end up hitting another menu that I didn't want to. However, the bundle case does help in this case. Another feature present only in the 8 Pro is motion graphics smoothing. When enabled, it bumps up the frame rate of any video for a smoother soap opera-like feel when viewing it in full screen. The comfort tone toggle in the display settings is also new and behaves similar to Apple's True Tone. It adjusts the display's color temperature based on the ambient light around you. The display is vibrant, colorful, and has good brightness. The stereo speakers sound great, just like on the OnePlus 8. They are loud, sound balanced, and the Dolby Atmos setting helps improve the quality and spatial separation. HDR content also looks very good, and most of the streaming apps such as Netflix had no problem playing back HDR content on the 8 Pro. The 8 Pro's in-display fingerprint sensor works very well without any fuss. You can also use face recognition, which I found to be equally fast. The glacial green color that I received looks beautiful, and I love the feel of the frosted glass back. It can get a little slippery, but at least fingerprints aren't a big problem. Overall, the OnePlus 8 Pro is very well built, feels very premium, and it also looks great in this glacial green color. It is a little big and single-handed use isn't the easiest, but I did get used to it after a few days of using it. The software experience is very similar to the OnePlus 8. Oxygen OS feels snappy, and Android 10 in general runs very well. App and gaming performance was pretty solid too. Real Racing 3 looked great on the 8 Pro's display. Games with colorful graphics such as Hungry Dragon and Hawk looked especially good. Some titles like Fortnite can also take advantage of the higher refresh rate display and run at a higher frame rate. Now, traditionally, OnePlus phones have had relatively weak cameras, and I'm quite excited to see if OnePlus has closed the gap with flagships from Samsung, Google, and Apple on this front. The primary camera gets a big update. It's a 48-megapixel Sony IMX689 sensor, and we'll see what it can do very soon. You also get an 8-megapixel telephoto camera, a 48-megapixel wide-angle camera, and a new 5-megapixel color filter camera. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't test out the color filter camera as it is disabled in the current firmware. Now, this happened after some users discovered that this camera could actually see through some thin layers of plastic and even some pieces of clothing, causing a huge privacy uproar. However, OnePlus has told us that they will be enabling it via a future update, so it's interesting to see how they fix it. When shooting under good light, the main camera captures very good details with a neutral color tone. Edges of objects were well defined, textures looked natural, and there was no noticeable noise even on the sides of the frame. Dynamic range is also particularly good with lots of visible detail in the shadows and highlights. Photos from the wide-angle camera look good too, and like the OnePlus 8, the colors are well balanced and in line with the main sensor. The OnePlus 8 Pro automatically switches to the wide-angle camera and enables super macro mode when you bring the phone close enough to a subject. Macro shots look very good and are miles better compared to the dedicated 2 megapixel macro camera on the OnePlus 8. Next, we put the 8 Pro's hybrid zoom to the test. Naturally, I had to compare it with one of the best zoom cameras around, the Galaxy S20 Plus. Now at 3x zoom, the 8 Pro and the S20 Plus are quite evenly matched. The Samsung has a slightly better exposure overall and is less aggressive with the sharpening, but the 8 Pro isn't far behind. 10x zoom is usually the sweet spot for the S20 Plus, and here the 8 Pro manages to match Samsung in texture quality and colors. The only real difference between the two shots is that the S20 Plus lifts the shadows, giving the objects more depth, but other than that, it's very close. Finally, at 30x zoom, the Galaxy S20 Plus does the best job of cleaning up noise, but at the cost of details. The 8 Pro, on the other hand, actually manages slightly better details, but the trade-off is slight grain in the image. Overall, I'm actually pretty impressed with the 8 Pro's zoom capabilities and also quite surprised that OnePlus isn't making a bigger deal about it than it should. In low light, the main sensor captures well-lit landscape shots with good details. Nightscape helps fix the exposure a bit and also produces slightly better textures. The wide-angle camera suffers the most in low light, but Nightscape helps salvage the shot. The 8 Pro doesn't switch to the telephoto camera in very dim lighting, as it simply does a digital zoom using the main sensor. For selfies, this phone uses a Sony IMX471 16-megapixel sensor, which is possibly the weakest of the lot. It handles HDR well and captures decent skin tones, but skin textures look heavily processed even under good lighting. Indoors with good artificial lighting, we did manage to get some decent results. However, in very low light, skin textures appeared soft and details weren't great. The screen flash is quite effective for exposure, although it doesn't help much with details or textures. The OnePlus 8 Pro can shoot up to 4K 60fps. In standard video mode, image quality is very good, exposure is handled well, and the footage is stabilized too. Here you can switch between the main wide-angle and telephoto camera while recording up to 4K 60fps, which is something not many flagships offer. HDR video is a great addition too and makes a big difference to the dynamic range. It's most effective if you're shooting a subject directly against a light source. Now let's talk about the battery life. In general, I found the battery life to be excellent, as the 8 Pro easily lasted a day and a half with typical usage, with the display resolution and refresh rate at the highest respective settings. The Warp Charge 30T charger tops out the battery completely in under an hour, which is very quick. For fast wireless charging, you will need the special Warp Charge 30 wireless charger, which I couldn't test out since OnePlus didn't send it with the phone. The 8 Pro, however, does work with any Qi wireless charger, so it's not a big problem. Reverse wireless charging works well too. Simply turn it on and place any compatible device on the phone's back to begin charging. OnePlus has had a good streak over the years, but none of its phones has felt as complete as the OnePlus 8 Pro. We are now dealing with a proper flagship smartphone, the kind that can go toe-to-toe with the best out there. I would say if you have the budget, then skip the 8 altogether and just go for the 8 Pro instead. Cameras have always been a hot button subject for OnePlus devices, and this time it's no different. I'm curious to see how the company redeems this color filter camera, but other than that, I have no complaints with the rest of the rear sensors. However, I do think it's high time we got a better selfie camera, at least in the Pro models. At a starting price of 54,999 rupees, the OnePlus 8 Pro is still a lot more affordable than the Samsung Galaxy S20, which starts at 70,000 rupees. And it's definitely a lot cheaper than Apple's iPhone 11 Pro, which is well above a lakh rupees. So if you think about it, even though prices of the OnePlus devices have been increasing year on year, it is still a flagship killer in the grand scheme of things. So thanks for watching our review of the OnePlus 8 Pro. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, for everything tech, log on at gadgets360.com.